Welcome to the Justin Strawn Podcast. I am the aforementioned Justin Strawn. I'm glad to be with you to finish up the week that I am recording, my recording week here on a Wednesday. Decided to go ahead and get it done a little bit earlier this week because Mississippi State's basketball team played last night. Plus, we also got some news in terms of the college baseball preseason rankings. We'll talk about those. We'll also talk about one of the biggest shows from last year. It debuted last week as well. That is the Pitt. I want to talk about what I thought about it, but also want to mention some weird things about the audio, because the audio was just kind of weird in this first episode for season 2. So I want to discuss that a little bit and some shows that I'm looking forward to that are coming out this week. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Let's start with the bad, because last night, Mississippi State played Alabama in basketball at Humphrey Coliseum. They ended up losing pretty badly. I think it was by 15 points. It was not a pretty game. It was basically, 97-82. It was almost a verbatim copy of the Kentucky game from Saturday. It was Mississippi State was up by 12 points a little after the halfway point in the first half, and then Alabama goes on a run to close out the first half and take a 2-point lead into the locker room. And once they do that, they end up extending the lead into the second half. They were up by like 22 points at one point. Mississippi State did climb back a little bit, and they end up losing 97-82. But what's interesting about this, like I said, it was almost a actual copy of what happened against Kentucky. They were up, playing well, playing about as well as you could hope for against a quality opponent, and then the team just falls apart. But what's interesting about this one is Chris Jans, every single game, he has a very particular substitution pattern that he uses for Josh Hubbard. Josh Hubbard is his best player. He wants to keep him in the game as much as possible. And so when he gets him rest, he wants to try to maximize that rest during the game as much as possible. So typically around the 10-minute mark, somewhere around that point in the game, whenever there's a stoppage in play in the first half, he'll do it in the second half as well. It just depends on how the game is playing out, but always in the first half. Around the 10-minute mark, once there's a stoppage of play, either shortly before or shortly after the clock hits the 10-minute point of the half, he'll pull Josh Hubbard off of the floor. And the reason he pulls him off there is because he's going to keep him off the floor until the under 8-minute media timeout. And basically, he's trying to steal as much rest as he can. He wants to combine, a couple of minutes on the bench for him, plus the extra couple of minutes that he'll get from the media timeout to get him some rest. And this is how he tries to utilize that media timeout to get Josh Hubbard a little additional rest. So what's interesting about this is normally in the first half, this is when Mississippi State is in danger of a team running away from them, a team catching up to them, whatever it may be. If Mississippi State is up, then sometimes the team will actually draw closer to them because obviously their best player is not on the floor, and Mississippi State normally has a harder time scoring. Or if Mississippi State is trailing, the other team can extend their lead because, again, they can't score as well with Josh Hubbard being on the bench during this time. So it's always crucial how Mississippi State plays, like in this 2 to 3 minute stretch of the game in the first half. And normally you're just kind of hoping that Mississippi State can tread water. If they can just kind of stay afloat and, not let the other team pull away from them, not let them catch up to them, just kind of keep the lead where it is or stay as far behind as you were when Josh Hubbard goes to the bench, you're normally pretty good. Well, what happens in this instance on Tuesday night is Mississippi State actually extends their lead. I think they were up like 7 or 8 points when Hubbard goes to the bench. And they actually extend the lead to 12 points. When he comes back off the bench after the media timeout, this is when it actually starts to fall apart. And what happens is, what's typical with a team like Mississippi State, when you have a guy who is easily your primary scorer, a guy who is easily the one who is taking up most of your shots, if he's not getting it to fall down, then it's not going to go well for your team. And he comes in, Alabama was focusing on him hard last night. He ends up he scores 23 points, but it takes 6 of 16 from the field. And I think he was 2 of 8, from 3-point range. They were just keying on him heavily, and he just never could get anything going. But he comes in and he tries to basically take over the game like he normally does. right after the timeout. And unfortunately, sometimes Mississippi State, the rest of the team, will just kind of stand around and watch him when he's trying to do this. And he didn't really get a whole lot of support once he comes off the bench. And they were so focused on shutting Hubbard down that it allowed them to catch up, eventually take the lead, and then just pull away. Look, Mississippi State just did not shoot the ball very well last night. That's really what it boils down to. They didn't turn the ball over. They only had 4 turnovers. They only had, they were, I think they both rebounded about the same. So, like, the only real statistical difference you see in this game is the shooting. Mississippi State shot 37%. Alabama shot 44% from the field. Alabama was hitting their shots, and Mississippi State just simply wasn't. Nobody played well for the Bulldogs last night. Like I said, they were just really focusing on Hubbard, and they did a really good job of kind of taking his game away from him. And I've never seen Hubbard get blocked as much. I think he got blocked 2 or 3 times last night because he elevates so well. He normally doesn't have to. He normally doesn't get blocked very much because of the fact that he has such a great vertical, and he uses that on his jump shots. Like I said, it's not getting blocked. It's not something you normally see, but I think he got blocked at least 2 times, maybe 3 times last night. It's just not something you see, and it really kind of affected his rhythm. He just could never get anything going, but nobody else could either, and that was the problem. Alabama basically said, we're going to make Jaden Epps, we're going to make a George, or we're going to make Quincy Ballard, we're going to make all those other guys beat us, and they couldn't do it. Jaden Epps has been really good this year, but his shooting percentages have not been great since the Bulldogs entered SEC portion of the schedule. He has another rough night shooting. He ends up scoring, I think, like 15 points or something like that, but he is 5 of 15 from the floor. George, after having 3 pretty solid games, comes out and doesn't have a very good game last night. Quincy Ballard, look, here's the thing with Quincy Ballard. He shoots the ball terribly last night. He's 1 of 5. I think he had 6 points. He got to the free throw line some. But I can live with that if he gives us 17 rebounds a game. That's the one thing that has just kind of been shocking to me ever since Quincy Ballard, who is like 7 feet 260 or whatever. I don't know what his actual dimensions are, but he's a big dude, and the fact that he hasn't just been like getting double-digit rebounds every single game has just been shocking to me. Well, finally last night, he at least got that. He got 17 rebounds. So there's at least that to look forward to. But the problem that you have with Mississippi State's basketball team at this point, you had an opportunity to win a game against a quality opponent. You were at home. You had a good lead. You were playing really well, and then you just fell apart. Like I said, it's the second game in a row that this happened because they did the same thing against Kentucky. They were playing really well, and then they just fell apart at about the midway point of the first half, and now they are at 2-2. A 2-0 start to the SEC play is now gone, and now you're going to have to find a way to win some tough games. You got to win Saturday. This Mississippi State basketball team has to win this Saturday against Ole Miss. They just do. If you want to have any chance of making the NCAA tournament, this is a team you have to beat. You'll be playing at home. It's a team that's kind of hovering around 500. You can't afford to lose to that team. Ole Miss's net ranking is right around 100 or so, somewhere around there. I think they may be a little higher than that. You can't afford to lose that game at home. You just can't. And another reason why Mississippi State needs to win this game, they just need to get a win over Ole Miss. Here's the deal: if Ole Miss is going to be better in football, and maybe look, I don't know what they're going to eventually be now that Lane Kiffin is gone. I don't know what this Ole Miss team will be in football with Pete Golding at the helm, but they have a head start, to say the least, on Mississippi State. Like I said, I don't know if they'll be able to continue the success that they had with Lane Kiffin, but at the very least, they have a really good head start on Mississippi State. So if you're going to be worse than Ole Miss in football, then you'd better find a way to be better than them at everything else. You need to be better at them than basketball. You need to be better at them than baseball. You got to find a way to be better than everything else. So you got to win this game. Mississippi State fans need a W over Ole Miss. They just really do. And this isn't a typical Chris Beard team. This is their 3rd year, and they're not playing great. And so you need to find a way to go out and get that win. Chris Jans for the most part, he's done pretty well against Chris Beard. It's not a really big sample size, but he's 3-1 so far. He won both games against them last year, and that's one of the reasons why Mississippi State ends up making it into the NCAA tournament. Most people thought that they would at best split because Ole Miss was the better team last year, and Mississippi State went into Ole Miss last year and actually beat them, and it was a bit of a surprise to a lot of people. So, like I said, you got to win this game. You're going to have to be better than Ole Miss in everything else if you want to keep Mississippi State fans engaged in any type of athletic venue. You really do. If you can't do that, then it's going to be a real struggle for everything else, with the probably the only exception of baseball. And speaking of baseball, let's go ahead and transition into that. The D1 baseball preseason poll came out this past week. I've been very interested to see what the preseason polls are going to say about the baseball team. They are stacked, they are loaded. And I will get more into, as we get closer to the start of the year, start of the 2026 season, I'll do more of an actual preview of the team as we get closer. But this Mississippi State baseball team has a chance to be really, really special. They had a great portal class come in. They got a lot of Virginia's best players when John O'Connor came in as the new head coach. Plus, they kept a lot of their really good players. And I've been very interested to see what they would be when the rankings came out. And we get our first one. The one that matters the most to me is the D1 baseball preseason poll. It's the one that I typically refer to whenever I refer to baseball polls, and they are number 4 in the country. Number 1 in the country is UCLA, number 2 is LSU, number 3 is Texas, and number 4 is Mississippi State. And that's great. They are, like I said, being number 4 in the country is fantastic. I will say this, everybody's excited. A lot of people are just really chomping at the bit to get to baseball season. I completely understand why. Obviously, football didn't go the way that we wanted it to go. Basketball has gotten off to a rough start, to say the least. So people are really wanting this baseball team to get back to what Mississippi State baseball is typically doing year in and year out. They're typically a really good program, a program that should be in the hosting conversation every single year, a team that should be in the top 8, the top 8 host every single year, top 8 seeds, discussion every single year. That's what Mississippi State baseball should be. And if the preseason polls are correct, then it looks like Mississippi State is going to be back there. My only caution to you is this. I know a lot of people think that this team can win a national championship. And I think they can. I do think they can. I don't think there's any question about that. But if you start getting national championship or bust hopes, there's the chances of being disappointed are really, really good. I mean, as good as this team is, and they are stacked in the lineup, their lineup is going to be absolutely stacked. I've subscribed to D1 baseball, and I've kind of been reading up on them and following along with what their coverage has been saying. I mean, the only real person who isn't going to have to split time with somebody else, at least here at the start, until somebody establishes themselves as the number 1 guy at each position, is Ace Reese. He's about the only one that's not going to have to worry about that. He'll be penciled in every single game as long as he doesn't get hurt. There's a lot in baseball, especially with the pitching staff, that can go wrong and just really make things difficult, even for the most talented teams. I'm a fan of the Los Angeles Dodgers. They are, every year in and year out, they are expected to go to the World Series and win. That is the expectations that team has established because of their payroll, because of the people that they have on their team. That's just the expectations at this point. And as talented as the Dodgers are, what happened last year with them is their bullpen was not good, and it was a huge hindrance to them. It was a little surprising to a lot of people that they were able to win the World Series, because they thought the bullpen was eventually just going to explode and cost them a number of postseason games. And that's the type of stuff that can happen even in college baseball. The pitching staff is going to be good. It's supposed to be very good. But the problem is they don't have the same depth in the pitching staff that they do in the lineup. A few key injuries for that pitching staff, and it could become a difficult season where you're basically just trying to outscore the other opponent. And Mississippi State did a pretty decent job of that last year once Chris Lamonis was gone and Justin Parker took over as the interim coach last year. Look, if they need to get to the point where they need to outscore the other team, they're going to be more than capable of doing so. Just the real problem that you have is if that pitching rotation, and if their pitchers start suffering injuries, and they're at the age that that 18 to 22 age range is when you can start to see injuries. It can derail even the most talented teams. Like I said, it's always interesting with baseball to me because of the fact that so many pitchers do suffer arm injuries throughout the course of the year. The ones that suffer the least are typically the ones that end up having the best success throughout the course of the year, and that's going to be key for Mississippi State going into this first year of the Brian O'Connor era. Can they avoid the injuries to compete at the level that we expect them to? Look, it's not going to be easy. There are 11 teams currently in the D1 baseball preseason poll. There's not going to be 11, I don't think, when we get to the end of this season. I just don't see that being the case. There won't be 11 teams. in the SEC ranked when we get to the end of it. There's just going to be a lot of people beating up on each other. And Mississippi State has to play a lot of them. They've got to play LSU. They've got to play Vanderbilt. They've got to play Arkansas. Ole Miss isn't ranked, but they're probably just on the outside of being ranked, if I had to guess. Excuse me. They have to play UCLA at one point this year. They've got an incredibly difficult schedule. If they can win around 40 games, around 38 to 40 games in the regular season, because of the fact that their schedule is going to be so difficult, they'll easily be a hosting team, and like I said, in that discussion for one of the top 8 seeds. That's going to be, it just depends on if they're able to capitalize on them. Now, look, this is one of the more talented teams that we've had, but like I said earlier, the most talented teams don't always win. 2016 is one of the most talented teams I've ever seen Mississippi State have. 2016, that team was just absolutely loaded, and they ended up running up against a very hot Arizona team and end up losing the super regional in 2 games. So like I said, it's baseball can be a weird sport when you get to like the postseason play and stuff like that. Now, this team, as long as injuries don't just kill them, if they don't get to a super regional at the very least, or hosting a super regional at the very least, it's going to be a disappointment. I would agree with that. But anything above that, it's a bit of a dice roll with winning baseball, because especially when the fact that when you get to College World Series, there's 8 teams there. You got to battle through brackets. It's just a challenge. This is one of the reasons why Mississippi State even though they've been to the College World Series 12 times, they've only won once. You got a lot of people that you're going to have to that are going to be fighting for this as well. LSU is going to be just as stacked as they have been. Jay Johnson has really taken that program up a level since he got there. And look, we're talking about one of the best baseball programs in the country, and they found a different level with their current coach in Jay Johnson. So I'm excited about the team. I'm really hoping that this team can meet these expectations. And if they do, then we should have a trip to Omaha in our future. All right, let's talk about a couple of entertainment things that I want to discuss before I sign off on the day. I've watched The Pitt. My wife and I, we don't always agree on a lot of stuff that we watch on TV or a lot of movies that we see. Whenever we find one show that we like, that we both want to watch, we try our best to make sure that we watch it. And The Pitt is one of those. She was higher on it than I was. I like The Pitt. I think it's a really good show. But I'm not quite as high on it as anybody else is. Most people throughout the course of this country thought The Pitt was like one of the best shows of the year last year. It was, if you looked at like top television shows of 2025, most people will have The Pitt at like number 1 or number 2. I didn't have it on my top 10. It was just outside, but it wasn't in my top 10. And one of the reasons why I didn't like it as much as everybody else is because they focus so much on the medicine, and I don't understand a lot of what they're talking about. So I kind of tend to just kind of like daydream when they're getting really into the medical part of the show, and I just kind of like just glaze over when they do that. But I'm really kind of excited about the second season, because it looks like even though they're not going to be leaving the hospital, they're not going to be leaving the ER, it feels like they're trying to incorporate more of their personal lives, these doctors, into the show. And that's the type of stuff that I want to see more of. That's the type of stuff that interests me whenever I'm watching a television show like this. So I'm very excited about it. Now, my wife, she said she wasn't quite as impressed with the first episode of season 2. So whatever. But here's the deal. When I was watching it, after about 5 minutes, I was like, there is something weird with the audio here. Every line that was being spoken, it sounded like they were talking through a tin can in this. And maybe it wouldn't have been as noticeable if my wife and I if we hadn't watched the season 1 finale right before we turned on season 2, episode 1. We wanted to go ahead and just kind of go back and watch that one before we started the new season. And the audio was just as crisp and clear as it normally is. And then when we go into season 2, episode 1, there is this, like I said, it sounds like they're talking in a tin can. There's this kind of echo to every single line that's being spoken. And I thought it was just me because my wife wasn't saying anything. And she's the type of person that if she notices something like that, she's going to say something that's going to bother her. So I went online and I Googled what's wrong with the audio in The Pitt season 2. And I found a Reddit thread, and there was a lot of other people who were noticing it as well. It wasn't just me. So I was glad to see that. And a lot of them were talking about watching it on their phone, which I don't understand, watching a TV show on your phone, but regardless, I was just kind of shocked by this, because it apparently is a problem. It wasn't just my TV, it wasn't just my app. There was a lot of people who were having the same issues with their audio. And this was like the show of the year last year. It won a whole bunch of Emmy Awards. Like I said, it was the number 1 show for a whole bunch of people in 2025. Despite that, we had these really, really bad audio issues. I was just really kind of taken aback by the fact that the audio sounded so bad. And the first episode of season 2. I'm hoping that when the new episode comes out tomorrow night, that will just be an episode 1 thing. But I'm afraid if this is what was sounding like in the first episode, it's going to continue to sound that way in the second episode. I don't know. We'll see. But it really bothered me. I don't know if anybody else did, but if you want to like drop something in the comments or whatever, I would love to hear it if you heard it as well. So, all right, let's go ahead and talk about a couple shows I'm looking forward to. One is on Apple. I think it actually released last night, if I'm not mistaken. That is the second season of Hijack. Idris Elba is the lead on this. The first season was a lot of fun. It's completely absurd at times. It's like eye-rolling absurd at times, and it does kind of take me out of that first season. Kind of took me out of the show a little bit just because of the fact that it was so absurd. But it was still a really fun show. I really did enjoy it overall. But there were times it's like, really, are we really doing some of the things that we're doing in the show? But like I said, the first season of Hijack was a lot of fun. Didn't really know how they were going to do a second season, and I haven't seen the trailers. I've seen a couple of quick, brief commercials. It looks like they're going to be hijacking a train, if I'm not mistaken. But like I said, I haven't seen it yet, so I'm not really sure. But I'll be very interested to see what the setup and what the premise of this season is. Idris Elba is fantastic. I love a lot of the things that he does. I think he's one of our better and more underrated actors. And he got a late start. His popularity and his fame has really come on as of late here in his later years in life. But I'm just a huge fan of Idris Elba. I think he's fantastic. Looking forward to seeing what they do in the second season. Because like I said earlier, I really was not expecting to get a second season of this. I thought it would just be the type of show that only got 1 season just because I didn't know how you could set up a second season, but they are doing it. So I'm very interested to see how this ends up playing out. Another show that's going to be releasing, I think, on Thursday on Peacock. Peacock is like one of those streamers that I always forget about. I always forget that it exists, but I do occasionally find it. A show that I'm looking forward to, like I said, I think it comes out this Thursday. I'm trying to look up the release date. Is the show Ponies. This Pony stands for person of no interest. It's a espionage term. Look, I am one of the few people that is still holding on to his Emilia Clarke stock. Emilia Clarke should have become one of the biggest stars in television, in movies, whatever it may be. After the success of Game of Thrones, she was really good in Game of Thrones. She was a star of one of the biggest television shows to ever hit TV, and she's a beautiful woman. I'm just really, at some point, things have to take off for this woman. I'm just really surprised that they haven't so far. I'm like I said, I thought that by this point in her career, that she would have had a whole lot more fame and success, either in movies or in television. But it's been a bit of a struggle. She was in the Solo film, the Star Wars Solo, about Han Solo in his younger years. It was not really well received. She was in, easily to me, the worst MCU thing that has come about with Secret Invasion. That was just not good. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what they're going to do with that. But like I said, I'm still holding on to my Emilia Clarke stock. At some point, she just has to take off, and maybe this could be the thing that ends up doing it for her. She's also in it with Haley Lou Richardson. The last thing that I saw her in was in the second season of White Lotus. I don't know if she's done anything since then, but she was really good in that season. I thought she was one of the standout performers. She was charming, adorable, a fan favorite. So I'm looking forward to seeing what she brings to the table when this series takes place. Like I said, I forget about Peacock a lot, but I'm really excited about this. I think it could be a really good show. I haven't seen any reviews yet. I don't know if how much other people are looking forward to it, but I'm looking forward to it. So it should be a lot of fun. All right, guys, kind of a short show today. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I always appreciate everybody who tunes in, whether it's on TikTok, whether it's on one of the podcast apps, all those places. If you haven't rated and subscribed, please do so. But until next time, we'll talk to you later.